Hi, I'm Juliet. At my mother's vow renewal, I sat 3 tables behind the family I was born into, not because I was late, because I was removed. They changed my seat, erased me from the slideshow, and stole the gift I spent months preparing. Then, her new husband poured a bucket of food waste over me, in front of everyone. But the worst part wasn't the garbage. It was realizing I had been groomed for silence, trained to endure, not to speak. So why did I show up at all? And what exactly happened 5 minutes later? You'll want to hear this. I hadn't been back to Napa in 5 years, maybe 6. I tried not to count. Time does that thing. It blurs when you stop being welcome somewhere. The road into town hadn't changed. Still winding through endless rows of vineyards, still lined with those quiet little estates with their iron gates and trimmed hedges, the sort of place people called charming, even if it made you feel like an outsider just by breathing wrong. I drove slow, both hands on the wheel, letting my eyes wander past the tall cypress trees. I spotted the vineyard where my mother's vow renewal was happening as soon as I turned the last corner. It had a wrought iron sign that read, Monroe Estate. Not Keller, not Whitlow, just Monroe. Her maiden name, like she had chosen to rebrand herself. I parked in the back, near the gravel lot. No valet came to greet me, probably because I hadn't used the preferred entrance, or maybe because my name wasn't on the list that mattered. A text buzzed on my phone just as I cut the engine. It was from Mrs. Carla Peterson, one of my dad's old friends. Glad you're going, sweetheart. He would have wanted you there. Stay strong. She didn't know it, but that was the first kind word I'd received all week. I stared at her message, swallowing the lump forming at the base of my throat, then tucked my phone away. I reached into my bag and pulled out the printed email, the official invitation. It was all digital, no gold leaf, no cardstock, just Arial font and a PDF attachment. To Juliet W. From the Monroe Keller family. Subject, Vow Renewal Event. RSVP requested. My full name wasn't even used, just Juliet W., like I was some old colleague or +1. No daughter of the bride, no greeting, no warmth. I knew Callista had gotten a thick envelope in the mail, cream cardstock, calligraphy, wax seal. She posted a photo of it online with the caption, "So proud to celebrate love again." She got tagged in dozens of comments about how beautiful the couple looked. I didn't comment. I didn't even like the post. When I stepped out of the car, the air was crisp. April in Napa was always like this, sunny but not warm enough to be comfortable. The breeze snuck through the hem of my dress as I made my way toward the main lawn. The first staff member I encountered wore a tight black polo and an earpiece. He gave me a once-over. "You with catering?" he asked. I blinked. "No, I stopped myself. No need to announce I was the bride's daughter, not if they weren't going to act like it. "I'm a guest," I said instead. He frowned and checked his clipboard. "Name?" "Juliet Whitlow." He scanned his list, then nodded vaguely. "Okay, you'll be with Group C, tent seating to the left. Past the gift table." Group C. I had no idea what that meant, but it didn't sound like family. I walked where he pointed, past rows of white folding chairs and decorative barrels covered in lace. Strings of fairy lights dangled from the trees, not yet lit. Everything looked curated, beautiful, staged. No one greeted me, not Callista, not my mother. I caught a glimpse of Warden from afar, shaking hands with a man in a blue suit near the rosé tasting station. A young woman holding a clipboard intercepted me as I wandered. "Hi, do you need help finding your seat?" I nodded once. She led me to a round table tucked under a shady corner of the tent, next to a row of bushes and not even close to the main aisle. A white card sat at the plate in front of the chair. Juliet W. Handwritten, but not elegantly. No floral design like the others. I sat down. Alone. Across the lawn, I spotted Callista posing for pictures near the archway. Her champagne-colored dress glinted under the sun. Our mother stood beside her, laughing, hand on her shoulder. The photographer clicked away. No one noticed me. I looked down at my lap. The dress I'd chosen was navy blue, tasteful, understated, but apparently the theme was soft blush tones. No one told me. I looked like I was attending a business luncheon. I thought about going to the restroom to check my face in the mirror. Instead, I reached into my bag again and pulled out the small gift I'd brought, wrapped in brown paper, tied with twine. It was a framed letter my father wrote to my mother a year before he passed. I'd found it in storage, restored it, had it mounted. I even cleaned the frame myself. It felt important, like bringing a part of him with me, since nobody else seemed to remember he existed. I clutched it for a moment, then tucked it gently under my chair. A breeze kicked up again, fluttering the tablecloth. I crossed my arms. I hadn't been here since the day I packed up my last box, years ago. After a blowout fight over Warden taking my name off some shared family documents, I had called my mother from the airport that night. She never picked up, never called back. Now I sat 3 tables away from her, and I wasn't sure she even knew I was here. The music changed. A soft jazz version of At Last began playing. Guests trickled in around me, filling seats, clinking glasses, whispering greetings. I didn't recognize most of them, or rather, they didn't recognize me. One woman squinted at my table, then whispered to her partner, "That must be the one from Portland?" I didn't respond, just straightened my back and stared at the stage. A staffer passed by with champagne flutes. I declined. My stomach twisted. Not from hunger, but from something else. That heavy kind of anticipation you get before something breaks. I couldn't name it yet, but I felt it in the marrow. All around me, the celebration continued. Laughter, lights, the smell of rose petals and white wine. And just like that, I knew. I hadn't been invited as family. I had been tolerated as a formality. I stayed seated for a while after that realization settled, like dust finally finding a place to land. I was no longer waiting to be noticed. Something inside me had clicked, not loudly, but definitively. A server came by with a pitcher of cucumber water. I nodded politely. He poured, hesitated like he wanted to say something, then moved on. I watched the condensation gather on the glass, tracing a slow, uncertain path down the side. Even the water didn't want to stay put. Eventually, I stood. There was no announcement, no internal drum roll, just the decision to stretch my legs before the ceremony began. As I walked toward what I thought was my assigned table, midway under the main tent, near the aisle, I saw someone else standing in front of it. A young woman in a pastel dress, her back to me, adjusting the place card. My name was no longer there. "Excuse me," I said, gently enough not to startle her. She turned. "Oh, hey, are you Juliet?" "Yes." She gave me the kind of smile you reserve for customers you feel mildly sorry for. There was a little change last minute. Callista wanted to rearrange seating so the photo flow would be better. "You're at table 9 now, back left corner near the beverage station." "Of course," I said. I didn't ask for an explanation, didn't point out that I'd been listed there days ago, that someone had just moved me forward, only to shove me back again. I thanked her and walked toward table 9, past linen-covered setups with monogrammed centerpieces and rows of wine glasses so perfectly aligned it felt military. Table 9 had no centerpiece. The chair covers were wrinkled. One seat was already occupied by a man in a linen shirt who was clearly part of the vineyard staff. He nodded at me, said nothing. I sat 2 chairs away. I wasn't in the mood for small talk. From where I was placed, I had a clear view of the front. The arch, the candle-lit path, the family table adorned with ivory roses. My mother stood near the front, chatting with a woman in a floral dress who used to be her real estate partner. Warden wasn't far off, telling some story, animated and loud. The guests around him were laughing on cue. Callista swept past with a clipboard and a headset, barely glancing at me. She looked like she was born for this role. Host, orchestrator, center of gravity. She reminded me of those politicians who made you believe they were listening when they weren't even hearing. Then, the MC took the mic, smiling broadly. He welcomed everyone, threw in a couple of jokes about second chances and lifelong love. The crowd responded with soft laughter and camera flashes. Then the lights dimmed, and he announced a surprise, a slideshow honoring the journey of Warden and Ivelisse. Soft piano music started playing as the first photo appeared, a blurry, romantic image of them in Italy, posed at sunset with wine glasses in hand. Then more. Warden helping Ivelisse into a car, the two of them painting a porch, hugging at a Christmas party, dancing at Callista's engagement dinner. Callista was in nearly every frame. Warden's son, too. Family dinners, birthdays, baby showers. Even friends of friends made it into the montage. But me? Not one single photo. I sat through the entire 7-minute reel, motionless. Somewhere around minute 4, I began to feel the sting. By minute 6, it turned into something sharper. Not quite rage, but close. When it ended, the crowd clapped. Someone near me said, "That was so beautiful." A woman I didn't recognize leaned toward me. "Weren't you living with them around then?" I turned slowly, offered a small nod. I was. "Oh, well, maybe they just couldn't find those pictures." She smiled kindly, as if that fixed anything. I stood without a word and made my way toward the side garden. It was quiet there, the kind of quiet that doesn't beg for attention. It simply exists, waiting. The air had cooled a little. I could still hear the murmurs of conversation, the sound of glasses clinking behind me, but it felt distant now. I found a low stone wall and sat. My phone buzzed in my hand, a reminder from my calendar. 2:00 p.m. Smile, even if it's fake. I'd written it the night I RSVP'd, thinking I'd need the nudge. I silenced it and opened my photos instead. There were dozens, images of me with Callista as kids, me holding her hand at her first dance recital, snapshots of me helping Mom unpack after the divorce, a blurry photo of me cooking for everyone on Thanksgiving years ago. I had documented what they erased. I wasn't being overly dramatic or sentimental. I knew when I was being excluded. And this wasn't forgetfulness. This was a decision. I helped raise Callista after Dad died. Stayed home from college for 2 years to work part-time and be there when Mom couldn't. I never asked for anything in return. No parade, no plaque, just a seat at the damn table. Instead, I got table 9 and a silent deletion from the official history. I scrolled to a folder in my files marked Receipts, Private. Inside, bank statements, confirmation emails, screenshots, a photo of the framed letter I restored as a gift, the one I hadn't given yet. I kept all of it, not because I planned to use it, but because some part of me had known. Or they say memory is slippery, that when people lie often enough, even they start to believe it. But files don't lie. Dates don't vanish. Screenshots don't forget. I wasn't ready to confront them. Not yet. But I could feel it building. Not a breakdown, a buildup, a choice forming itself in the silence. And if they wanted to erase me, fine. But they forgot one thing. I kept the receipts. The photos and emails in that hidden folder weren't just evidence. They were armor. Quiet, heavy, private armor I'd been building without even realizing it. I tapped the screen once, then locked my phone and slid it back into my clutch. The hum of conversation behind me had grown louder. People laughing, glasses clinking, background music picking up tempo as the string quartet transitioned to a medley of Elton John covers, the kind of celebratory noise that would have filled me with warmth once if the people making it had ever seen me as more than a side character in their curated lives. I needed air, not fresh air, just distance. I moved off the main lawn, through a side path that led toward a low stone wall, half covered in ivy. It wasn't far from the tent, but the chatter faded enough to let me breathe. My shoes crunched softly against the gravel. I didn't want to cry. I wasn't even sure I could cry at that point. The kind of ache I carried didn't show up in tears. It settled deeper, in places people couldn't see. I leaned against the wall and exhaled slowly, letting my head tilt back. The sky above was that soft, colorless blue that comes before dusk. Somewhere nearby, the quartet's violinist struck a note slightly off-key. A breeze lifted the hem of my dress. I closed my eyes, and just like that, I was 9 again. It had been a Tuesday. I remember because school had been canceled that day. Something about a burst pipe or a gas leak, I can't remember which. I was excited to come home early. But when I stepped into the house, there were boxes in the hallway. Warden, still relatively new in our lives back then, stood near the staircase with a clipboard. "That's not for you," he'd said when I started toward my bedroom. I blinked. What? Your mother and I agreed. That room's going to be converted. You can sleep down there, he said, gesturing toward a door I hadn't opened since we moved in. It was the coat closet under the stairs. Narrow, dusty, dark. I stood frozen, waiting for my mother to intervene. She didn't. She was in the kitchen, stirring something. I heard the wooden spoon hit the side of the pot. She didn't even look up. It's only temporary, Warden said. You'll be fine. I slept in that space for almost 5 months. No closet rod. One outlet. A single lamp I bought with allowance money. I lined the floor with old blankets. The smell of old wood and dust became normal. No one asked how I was sleeping. No one noticed I was always tired at school. And no one visited the closet, not once. Back in the present, I opened my eyes. The wall behind me was cold against my shoulder blades. I sat on the ledge and let my hands rest in my lap. I heard footsteps behind me, but I didn't turn around. Whoever it was, they stopped just out of view. I stayed still, hoping they'd take the hint and leave me alone. That's when I heard her voice. I told you she'd keep her mouth shut. She always does. My breath caught. Warden replied, his tone low and tight. She better. We don't need another one of her emotional episodes. It's not like she has a real reason to complain. Just keep her away from the mic during speeches, my mother said. She won't fight back. She's too proud for that. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. They were behind the hedge, just on the other side. Their voices were calm, composed, like they were talking about the weather, or what wine to serve with dinner. Not their daughter, not the child they once tucked into bed, though maybe that memory had faded along with the photos. I didn't hear them walk away. At some point, their voices trailed off, replaced by the sound of laughter from the main tent. I stayed seated for a while, unable to move. It wasn't just what they said, it was how they said it, like I was a problem they had to manage, like my silence was a convenience, not a sign of strength. I blinked hard. My vision blurred, but I still didn't cry, not out of defiance, just resolve. Ms. Lee flashed through my mind. Our old housemaid. She wasn't around long, maybe a year, maybe less. I was 10 when she left, no reason given, but I remembered her warm eyes, the way she slipped granola bars into my backpack, the night she found me crying under the stairs and knelt beside me with a flashlight. You're not invisible, sweet pea, she whispered. Just quiet, but quiet doesn't mean weak. I hadn't believed her then, but right now, I felt the truth of her words ring through me like a bell. My heart slowed, my jaw unclenched. I stood, brushed off the back of my dress, and squared my shoulders. They thought I wouldn't speak up because I hadn't before. They thought my silence was fear, but it wasn't. It was calculation. It was survival. It was preparation, and maybe it was time to show them that. I made my way back to the lawn with my spine a little straighter than when I'd left. No one noticed I'd been gone, or if they had, no one asked why. I was just another body among the crowd again, one that blended into the furniture when convenient. The MC had taken his place on stage, adjusting the mic and greeting guests with an overly rehearsed voice. Ladies and gentlemen, if you could take your seats, we're about to begin the official vow renewal ceremony. Chairs shifted, glasses clinked. The subtle hum of conversation slowed to a hush. I returned to table 9, the one practically tucked behind the dessert station. A waiter offered me sparkling water, and I accepted without a word. Callista glided toward the stage like she was the one renewing vows. Her dress flowed behind her, matching the pastel theme perfectly, her clipboard now replaced by a champagne flute. She wore success the way others wore jewelry, visible, deliberate, and meant to blind you. Next came the MC's introductions. Warm thank yous, a few quips. A well-placed joke about Warden finally getting it right on the second try. That earned laughter from most of the crowd, including my mother, who touched his arm gently as if it were all just so romantic. Then came the moment that almost snapped the thread I was still holding on to. Before we begin the vows, the MC announced, we have a surprise gift presentation, something truly special, something with history. My pulse quickened. A young man stepped onto the stage holding a framed letter. I recognized it instantly. The handwriting, the yellowed paper, the frame I had restored, the one I had wrapped in brown paper with twine, still tucked under my chair at that very moment. It was the letter my father wrote to my mother during the early days of their marriage. I had found it in an old storage box, preserved the ink, had it rematted by hand. I intended to give it to her today, not to win her back, but to give her something genuine amidst all this pretense. But before I could even move, Warden took the microphone. He cleared his throat and put on that performative charm I knew too well. "This letter," he said, holding it like a trophy, "was something I came across during one of our antique shopping weekends. I saw the script and knew immediately it belonged to her heart." My stomach turned. The crowd awed. My mother covered her mouth with her hand, eyes misty. She walked up to him, and he handed it to her like some grand romantic gesture. Cameras clicked. The MC beamed. I reached into my bag and felt the envelope still inside. My card, my handwriting, my gift, still with me. They had taken the gesture, rewritten the story, and passed it off like it was theirs. I stayed seated, biting the inside of my cheek so hard I tasted copper. I didn't make a scene, not yet. When the applause died down, the ceremony continued. The officiant stepped up. The vows were read. Warden's voice wavered slightly when he said the word forever. My mother's voice cracked at second chances. Then came the speeches. "Let's hear from some of the wonderful people who've been part of this journey," the MC said. "We'll begin with the lovely maid of honor, Callista Monroe." Callista stepped forward, voice soft and practiced. She spoke about family, about love growing stronger after loss. She told a story about Warden fixing a leaky pipe at 2 a.m. and made everyone laugh. She said my mother was the bravest woman she knew. One by one, others followed. Warden's son, a neighbor, even a couple who only knew them through Sunday brunches. Each took the mic. Each got a full introduction and polite applause. I waited and waited. The MC glanced at his list. "And that concludes our speakers." That was it. No mention of me. I stood, walked slowly toward the edge of the stage where Callista was standing. She noticed me too late to hide the flicker in her eyes. I kept my voice low. "You left me off the list?" Callista blinked. "What do you mean?" "I wasn't called up." "Oh," she said, feigning surprise. "I thought you didn't RSVP for a speech slot." "I wasn't invited to." "Well, it was a tight schedule. We had to prioritize the people who were involved more directly." I stared at her. "More directly than her daughter?" Callista gave a half shrug. "This day's about them, Juliet. Let's not make it awkward." I turned and walked away before I said something that couldn't be unsaid. Back at my table, I sat down carefully. The heat behind my eyes had cooled. I wasn't hurt anymore. I was done. I pulled out my phone, opened the receipts private folder. It was fuller now. I had screenshots of the email I sent Callista offering to prepare a tribute, her non-response, bank statements for the frame, a timestamp of the delivery. I even had the invoice from the preservation lab I'd used. I wasn't going to yell. I wasn't going to cry. That wasn't my style. But what they'd done today, taking something deeply personal and using it as stagecraft, wasn't going to disappear quietly. I opened a blank email. 2. Callista Monroe. CC, Evelise Monroe. Subject, about today. I typed 3 sentences. Clear, direct, professional. Then I saved it to drafts. Because I wasn't finished collecting. They thought they could rewrite history. I'm just getting started. The jazz trio had just started playing when I returned to the tent. The lights had softened to a golden hue now, casting a warm glow over everything except the hollow feeling settling in my chest. Guests were milling about with fresh glasses of wine, taking selfies against the vineyard backdrop, like this day was the pinnacle of grace and romance. It wasn't. I didn't return to my seat right away. Instead, I paused near the stone walkway, watching as Warden worked the room. He shook hands with ease, cracked jokes too loudly, and touched smalls of backs like he was running for office. My mother stood nearby, smiling just enough to pass for gracious, her hand resting lightly on the edge of a glass of sparkling rosé. She hadn't looked at me once all day. At this point, I didn't expect her to. I moved toward the empty wooden bench just beneath the vine-covered pergola. As I sat, the weight of the day started pressing deeper. I hadn't said much, hadn't made a scene, but something in me had begun to stretch, tight and slow, like a bow being drawn back. That's when I felt a hand on my shoulder. It wasn't harsh or demanding, just warm, familiar. "Juliet," a voice said gently. I turned and saw her. Aunt Diana, my father's sister. She wasn't someone who made entrances. She never competed with the chaos of the Monroe-Keller clan, always more observer than participant. But in that moment, she was exactly the anchor I didn't know I was looking for. She didn't speak right away. She just hugged me, fully, like she meant it. Like she remembered who I was beyond the seating chart and orchestrated smiles. When she pulled back, her hands stayed on my shoulders. "Your father," she said quietly, "told me once that you were his voice when he couldn't find his own. Don't let them silence you." I couldn't answer. My throat tightened in a way that no amount of control could undo. I gave a small nod and wiped beneath my eye without smudging my makeup. Diana patted my hand once more, then slipped back into the crowd like a breeze through trees, gentle but unmistakable. I sat still for a beat longer, letting her words settle. Then I opened my clutch. Inside was the envelope, cream-colored, thin, simple. I stood, walked deliberately toward Warden, who was mid-conversation with a man in a blue sport coat. His laugh died the moment he saw me approach. I smiled, calm, polite. "Since you're so good with documents," I said, handing him the envelope, "I thought I'd bring one for you." He hesitated, his smile flickering. He took it. I turned away without waiting for his response, but I didn't get far before I heard the tearing of paper behind me. I didn't look back. I didn't have to. I knew what was in that envelope. A formal legal notice, signed by my attorney, filed 3 days prior. Subject: allegation of identity fraud, unauthorized financial transactions, and illegal use of private information for personal gain. Details included: the fraudulent credit line opened in my name, documentation tying the IP address and login credentials back to devices registered at this very estate, bank flags, and pending investigation by state authorities, legal witness signatures. I walked toward the table where I had left my phone, past conversations that now seemed to carry a different kind of tension. Behind me, Warden's voice cut through the hum. "What the hell is this?" His tone wasn't loud, but it had that undercurrent, panic barely masked by performance. I turned slowly. He stood with the paper crumpled slightly in one hand, eyes wide and scanning, looking for someone, anyone, to jump in. My mother stood beside him, frozen. Her lips parted like she wanted to speak but couldn't summon words or spine. I took a step toward her, my voice low, steady. "He used your access to steal from me, and you enabled it." She blinked, then looked at the floor. Warden tried to chuckle. "This is ridiculous. A misunderstanding. She's blowing this out of—" "It's filed," I said, interrupting. "It's not a conversation. It's notice." I didn't wait for more. I turned and walked back to my table, threading through guests who were no longer just smiling. They were whispering. You could feel the air shift. The band kept playing, but it sounded off now, the rhythm too tight, like even they sensed the tension thickening beneath the string lights. When I sat, a man at the next table nodded to me with what looked like respect. A woman leaned over and said, "I always wondered about him. Good for you." I nodded back. No gratitude, no grin, just acknowledgement, because they didn't know everything. Not yet. That envelope wasn't my revenge. It was my restraint. After handing Warden the envelope, I had returned to my seat. I sat there quietly, watching him fumble with the papers, hearing the murmurs ripple through the tent like waves against brittle glass. But I didn't bask in it. I didn't come here to humiliate him. That wasn't my purpose. I just needed the truth to sit between us, visible, undeniable, and public. By now, the sun had dipped low behind the vines, painting the white tent with long golden shadows. The air had shifted, Just enough chill to make silk dresses feel thin, just enough tension to make even laughter sound brittle. Dinner service had started. Staff in black vests carried plates between the tables. I knew what was coming. I had requested a vegetarian option, flagged a dairy allergy in the RSVP. I double-checked with the planner weeks ago, and again in the email Callista never replied to. I wasn't taking chances, not with how my body reacted to certain ingredients. So when the server reached our table, I politely asked again, "Hi, just confirming, is that the non-dairy option?" The young man nodded, uncertain. "I believe so, ma'am." Before I could say more, I heard Warden's voice behind me, loud, clear, just loud enough to carry. "Get her something budget-friendly," he said to the server. "You know, for her lifestyle." The word lifestyle landed like a slap, meant to sting without leaving a visible mark. It worked. A few guests chuckled, soft, unsure, the kind of laugh people let out when they don't know if they're supposed to. A few others turned their heads toward me. One woman gasped and immediately looked away. I turned in my seat, slowly, locked eyes with him. Warden smiled like nothing had happened, shrugged like it was a harmless joke. He lifted his glass to take a sip, but I held his gaze longer than he expected. He faltered, lowered his hand. I didn't say a word. Not yet. A few minutes passed. The meal resumed. I didn't touch mine. Warden disappeared shortly after dessert was served. I assumed he'd gone to the restroom or stepped out for air. I didn't care. Or at least I told myself that. Until I saw him coming back. Not alone. He emerged from the side of the catering tent carrying something heavy, gray, and familiar. A commercial-grade plastic bucket, the kind used in kitchens for food scraps and used dishwater. My brain caught up with the moment a split second too late. He strode toward me like he was in a parade. Guests turned. Someone stopped mid-bite. One man even stood up, instinctively stepping aside. Warden stopped in front of me, raised the bucket, and said, "Here's the special soup you requested." Then he tipped it. The contents poured down, lukewarm, sour-smelling sludge, vegetable peels, greasy broth, soggy rice, pieces of bread soaked in water, and coffee grounds, cold and clumping. It hit me in waves. My hair, my face, my shoulders, my dress, everything was drenched in seconds. Someone screamed. A glass shattered. The music stopped mid-note. I stayed seated. For a moment, the only sound in the tent was the slow drip of garbage onto the floor and the faint rustle of horrified silence. I heard phones unlocking, camera shutters clicking. Someone whispered, "Is this real?" Another voice said, "She just sat there." I didn't move, didn't scream, didn't cry. Instead, I reached up and wiped a coffee ground off my cheek with the back of my hand. Slowly, deliberately. Then I stood, not too fast, not dramatic, just with dignity. My dress clung to me, soaked and stained. I could feel something sticky behind my knee. But I kept my head high, shoulders back. I looked at Warden, who now stood oddly still, no longer smug, not yet sorry, just suspended in uncertainty. I stared straight at him and said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "Now everyone can see exactly who you are." Then I walked out. No rush, no chaos, just step after step, heels squishing slightly with each move. I didn't turn around, didn't need to, because the moment I stepped past the first row of tables, I heard the murmurs behind me, people gasping, phones still recording, glasses clinking back onto plates. Callista's voice rose above the noise. "Let's all move on. Little mishap. Nothing to worry about, folks. Just some miscommunication." She tried to laugh, tried to sound breezy, but her voice cracked. I reached the edge of the tent. A breeze caught the edge of the fabric, lifting it slightly as I stepped through. Outside, the evening had settled into a golden hush. I kept walking, across the garden, past the hedges, toward the side path that led to the vineyard overlook. Behind me, I could hear the party trying to restart, a DJ saying something awkward into the mic, people trying to pretend they hadn't seen what they just saw, but they had. And no amount of Callista's spin could undo that, because what Warden had just done wasn't a mistake. It wasn't a joke gone too far. It was intentional, calculated, public. And it told everyone in that tent more about him than any legal document I could have printed. He used garbage to break me. All he did was clean the path for my fire. The wind was still on my skin as I crossed back over the gravel, the faint smell of spoiled soup and coffee grounds clinging to the inside of my nose. I had rinsed what I could off in the kitchen's prep sink, silently, surrounded by stunned caterers who didn't dare ask questions. One of them, a woman with a bun and a crooked name tag that read Vanessa, quietly handed me her spare jacket. I thanked her with a nod and slipped it on. The jacket was too big, dark navy with flower smudges on the sleeve. But it did what I needed. It made me look like I didn't belong to the event anymore. And that suited me perfectly. I didn't wait for music cues or a microphone pass. I walked straight back into the tent. Silence fell like a dropped curtain. Every chair turned. Every eye followed. I didn't break stride. When I reached the center, I gently took the mic out of the MC's hand. He stepped back instinctively, as if he could sense whatever was coming couldn't be hosted or smoothed over. I looked around. Some guests shifted in their seats. Others leaned in. Phones were already in hands, recording. I saw Warden standing near the front table, red-faced, arms folded tight like a boy who'd just been caught throwing rocks. "This won't take long," I said. My voice was clear. No tremble, no panic, just the kind of calm that comes when your spirit has already passed through the fire. "I'm Juliet Whitlow, daughter of Evelise Monroe, stepdaughter to Warden Keller." I paused to let the words sink. A few people exchanged glances. I noticed one woman across the aisle press her hand to her mouth. "Some of you know me," I continued. "Most of you have probably heard about me. The difficult daughter, the one who keeps her distance, the one who didn't RSVP properly, the one who doesn't know how to let things go." I paced slowly across the small stage area. "I've let a lot go, including my own voice, for years." I glanced at my mother. She looked at the floor, unmoving. "But I'm not here to revisit old emotions. I'm here for one reason, to correct the record." I pulled a folder from inside Vanessa's borrowed jacket and held it up. "This is a notarized legal notice filed last week. It contains documentation proving that Warden Keller used my name, my social security number, and my personal credentials to open an $80,000 line of credit." Gasps. Audible ones this time. Someone whispered, "What?" "He used that credit to fund a business that doesn't exist. He did it without my knowledge, using information that was accessible only through someone in my family." I took another step forward. "This is not an accusation. It's a statement of fact, with documentation, filed with the IRS, the credit bureau, and my legal counsel." I saw a man in a gray suit 2 rows back frown, then pull out his phone. I knew who he was, an old friend of my father's, now a regional banking manager. "This is felony-level fraud," he said aloud, confirming what I didn't need to dramatize. More murmurs, louder now. Callista stood frozen, her mouth slightly ajar. The MC looked ready to disappear. Warden's voice cut through the chaos. "She's lying." I turned slowly. "She's making this up. She's bitter. She's doing this for attention." I held his gaze, then raised the folder again. "This isn't for attention. This is for accountability." He stepped forward, raising a finger. "You're just, what? Jealous? Trying to ruin the one good thing your mother has?" I tilted my head, measured him for one long beat, and said, "Let the courts decide. I've brought the truth. You brought trash." It landed like a punch, not physically, but socially. His shoulders sagged just enough to register the hit. Behind him, someone clapped, then another. I didn't smile. I didn't need to. I turned my attention to my mother. She hadn't moved. Her hand clutched her wine glass so tightly the stem trembled. "I trusted you," I said. My voice didn't rise, didn't shake. "I trusted you to protect me, and you gave him the tools to rob me." She opened her mouth, then closed it. Nothing came. A silence heavier than anything I'd ever carried settled between us. It wasn't just disappointment. It was the death of illusion. The idea that love and loyalty were automatic in families, that silence could protect something sacred. They couldn't, and it didn't. I placed the folder gently on the nearest table and handed the mic back to the MC, who accepted it like it was radioactive. Then I walked out again, The same path I'd used to enter. No one stopped me this time. A few reached for me, visibly, half-heartedly, but their hands dropped before making contact, because they knew. They asked me to stay quiet. I spoke anyway. And the silence will never belong to them again. I didn't walk far after leaving the tent, just enough to let the hum of voices fade into the background and for the chill of the vineyard air to settle against my skin. The stars were beginning to creep into the sky, one by one, like hesitant witnesses. I found my mother standing alone near the wooden gate at the edge of the property, her back to me, her shoulders drawn tight. For a moment, I considered turning around, but the moment passed. I approached with steady steps. She must have heard me, but she didn't turn. I stood beside her, not too close, but close enough for her to feel me there. From my jacket pocket, I pulled out 2 papers. I had folded them neatly hours earlier, slipped them into a slim envelope, and sealed it, knowing this confrontation would come. "I'm not going to sue you," I said, voice even, "but I'm not going to protect you either." That made her turn. She didn't look surprised, just tired, maybe older than she had all day. "These are for you." I handed her the envelope. She didn't open it right away. She knew. Maybe she'd always known. "Revocation of shared access," I continued. "Financial, legal, property-related, effective immediately." Still, she said nothing. "The second is a personal boundary statement," I added. "Written, notarized. You're no longer authorized to represent me in any context, medical, legal, social." She finally looked at the envelope in her hands like it might burn through her skin. "I trusted you," I said softly. "You chose someone else's comfort over my protection. That's a decision I can't keep excusing." She opened her mouth, then closed it. The silence between us was thicker than the air, heavier than any accusation. "I didn't know," she whispered finally. "But you suspected." She didn't deny it. I waited for an apology, a plea, a reason. None came. So I nodded once. That was all I had left for her, and I walked away. The gravel crunched under my feet as I made my way back toward the tent. By the time I reached the outer edge, the energy had shifted again. Guests weren't mingling anymore. They were waiting. 3 police officers stood at the reception entrance, calm, professional, holding clipboards and wearing the kind of face you can't argue with. I stopped just short of the tent, folded my arms across my chest, and watched. Warden saw them first. He stood at the head of a cluster of confused-looking guests, waving his hands like a man about to tell a joke. They didn't laugh. The officers approached him slowly, clearly briefed on who he was and what they were there to do. "Mr. Keller," one officer said, voice even, "we need to speak with you." "What is this?" he barked, loud enough to draw attention. "This is a wedding. You can't be serious." The officer didn't flinch. "We have documentation. You're being detained for questioning regarding charges related to financial identity fraud and illegal use of personal data." "This is a setup," Warden yelled, his voice cracking. "This is her! This is all her doing!" Guests were frozen. Forks paused mid-air. Wine glasses halfway to lips. I didn't move, didn't blink. Another officer stepped forward, gently taking Warden's arm. "We're asking you to come with us voluntarily." He pulled his arm away. "This is harassment. I have rights." "Yes," the officer replied, "and you'll be reminded of them now." They read him his rights calmly, clearly, as one officer began leading him away. Warden looked around desperately. His eyes landed on me. "You did this," he spat. I tilted my head slightly. "No," I said. "You did." A woman near the front gasped. Someone else clapped. Only one, but that was enough. As the officers guided him out past the tent, past the stunned crowd and the half-empty glasses, no one stopped them. No one followed, not even my mother. Callista stood off to the side, clutching her phone like it might save her, her face blank. The music hadn't started again. No one dared press play. I exhaled, slow and quiet. A man in his 60s, someone I vaguely recognized from childhood barbecues, walked over and placed a hand gently on my shoulder. "I wish I'd done what you just did," he said, voice low. At my brother's wedding. My nephew's been paying the price ever since. I met his eyes. It's never too late. He gave a small nod. Sometimes it is. He walked away before I could reply. More guests began to leave quietly, slipping into the darkness with excuses and awkward goodbyes. Others lingered, eyes flicking between me and the police cruiser parked discreetly near the vineyard gate. I checked my phone. One new message. From my mother. It read, "I hope someday you'll forgive me." I stared at the screen, didn't type, didn't delete, just let it sit there. And then I walked to my car, no fanfare, no lights, no bouquet to carry. The gravel crunched again beneath my heels as I stepped away from the tent one last time. Inside the vehicle, I buckled in, started the engine, and rolled down the window just a little. The cool night air slipped in, brushing against my damp curls. I didn't turn the radio on, didn't need music to mark the end. As I pulled down the long dirt road leading out of the estate, the headlights stretched ahead of me like a path finally clearing. Some ties don't break, they rot, and the only healing is to cut them clean. The first rain in weeks was tapping gently against the window pane of my home office in Portland. The sky hung low, thick with the kind of gray that used to make me feel heavy, but today it felt soft, muted, almost forgiving. A mug of lukewarm chamomile rested near my keyboard. I hadn't touched it in over an hour. I'd been sitting there, not working exactly, just existing, thinking, breathing. The folder labeled Vow Renewal, Legal, Personal, sat open on my desktop, untouched since the day I came home. I hadn't deleted it, but I hadn't needed to look at it again either. My phone buzzed beside me. I ignored it. Instead, I clicked the red record icon on the voice note app. I'd gotten into the habit of talking things out instead of writing them. There was something raw and real about hearing my voice reflect the weight of what I carried. I cleared my throat. "It's been a week," I said aloud, voice steady but quiet. "A week since the arrest, since the speech, since the silence after everything stopped pretending to be beautiful." I paused, staring out the window. I keep thinking about how I didn't just lose a mother that night. I lost the fantasy that one day she'd wake up and choose me. My hand trembled slightly as I paused the recording. I didn't feel broken, but I didn't feel whole either. I opened the drawer next to my desk and pulled out a small envelope. Diana had mailed it 2 days earlier. It contained nothing more than a handwritten note and a Starbucks gift card. Her handwriting looked just like my father's. "You didn't lose a mother," it read. "You found your line. That's not grief, Juliet. That's a boundary." I read it twice more before setting it back down, the edges already soft from where I'd unfolded and refolded it. I looked over at the legal folder still sitting on my desktop, a quiet reminder of everything I'd had to defend. Warden was out on bail now. That part wasn't a surprise. Money moves fast when shame is on the line. The investigation was still ongoing, and I knew it would take months, maybe longer, but I wasn't checking the updates daily like I thought I would. My identity had been secured, my bank had reversed the charges, my credit score had recovered, I had regained what he tried to erase. But it was never about the money. "I didn't press charges to ruin him," I whispered. "I did it so he couldn't ruin anyone else." There was a certain peace in that, not revenge, but protection. For the next woman, for the next daughter. The mail had arrived a little earlier, and I'd left it sitting unopened on the entry table. I got up now, walked barefoot across the hardwood floor, and sifted through the small stack of envelopes. Utility bill, a charity newsletter, and then, one that stopped me. Handwritten. No return address, but I recognized the script immediately. I took it back to my office, sat down again, and held it for a moment before opening. It was from my mother. "I'm sorry," the letter began. "I was scared. I thought keeping him meant not being alone. I know now it meant losing you." No excuses, no explanations, just ink on paper, carrying the weight of someone finally willing to see themselves through the wreckage they helped build. I folded the letter carefully and placed it in the bottom drawer of my desk. I didn't tear it, I didn't burn it, but I didn't answer either. Some things you keep not to forgive, but to remember. Later that afternoon, I joined a video call with my team. We were wrapping up a grant application for our next project, a sustainability partnership with a small farm network in Washington. I logged in early, checked my lighting, sipped my now cold tea. "Hey, Juliet," my assistant Erin greeted, her cheerful voice cutting through the gray. "We're all set on our end." I smiled. "Thanks, Erin. Let's bring everyone in." 10 minutes into the call, we were discussing timelines when one of our newer hires, a young woman named Kendra, unmuted. "I just wanted to say, I'm really glad you're our CEO. You listen differently. You let people finish before jumping in." I blinked, surprised by the compliment. "Thanks, Kendra. That means more than you know." We wrapped the meeting with action items and a few jokes about office dogs and weekend plans. As the call ended, I sat back in my chair, feeling something that almost resembled lightness. Afterward, I stepped outside with a fresh cup of tea, letting the soft drizzle dust my sleeves as I stood on the back porch. Portland was always like this in the fall, gray skies that stretched like watercolor across the horizon, gentle rain that kissed your skin without asking. I looked out over the little raised garden bed I'd started last year. It was mostly herbs now, some of them overgrown, others just beginning to sprout again after the dry summer. I wrapped my hands around the warm mug and breathed in the scent of lemon balm. "I thought family was where you come from," I murmured to the sky. "Maybe it's where you stop running from yourself." I wasn't healed, but I was clear. And that would be enough. For now. Closure doesn't come when they say sorry. It comes when you no longer need them to. Sometimes, the most painful lessons don't come from strangers, but from the people who were supposed to love us the most. This story wasn't just about betrayal. It was about reclaiming your voice when others try to bury it. Juliet didn't need revenge. She needed truth, and the courage to stand alone when no one else would. Have you ever stayed silent to keep the peace, only to lose yourself in the process? Share your thoughts in the comments. We read every one. And if this family story resonated with you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you won't miss the next powerful chapter.